The floor dropped 3 inches beneath Marin Salk's left boot, and the wall behind her began to move. She threw herself forward without thinking, tucking her shoulder and rolling across the stone passage, as a slab of granite twice her height swung inward on a hinge that had not moved in 4,000 years, but operated as though it had been oiled yesterday. The slab struck the opposite wall with a sound like a cathedral bell, and the vibration traveled through the floor and up through her knees and spine as she came up in a crouch, headlamp sweeping the passage ahead. Dust everywhere. The beam cut through it in a solid white cone. Behind her, the slab settled into its new position with a grinding finality that sealed the corridor she had entered through. No going back that way. Marin's breathing was loud in the enclosed space, and she forced it down, counting 4 in, hold 4 out. The way her father had taught her in the mines outside Kailva when she was 9, and the tunnel roof had shifted and the dark had pressed in from every side. Marin! Dodd's voice crackled through the comm unit clipped to her collar. He was 300 meters behind her and 40 meters above, standing at the mouth of the dig shaft with the rest of the survey team, monitoring her biometrics and position on a tablet screen. Your heart rate just spiked to 140. What happened? Pressure plate, she said. Floor triggered, sealed the corridor behind me. A pause. She could hear Dodd processing, the careful silence of a man deciding how alarmed to sound. The 7th expedition mapped that corridor as stable. No trigger mechanisms noted. The 7th expedition didn't get this far. That was not speculation. Marin had read every report filed by every team that had attempted to penetrate the aura threshold, all 7 of them, spanning 60 years and 4 different species. The Concord Xenoarchaeological Survey maintained a classification system for unexplored structures, and the threshold had been designated Class 9, which meant significant cultural value, active defense systems, penetration not recommended without military escort. The military escort had been tried twice. The Brevari had sent a full tactical squad on the 4th expedition, 12 soldiers in powered armor with seismic sensors and drone support. They had made it 600 meters inside before the corridor walls had rearranged themselves overnight, turning the path behind the squad into a dead end, and the path ahead into a maze that had not existed on any previous scan. The squad had spent 11 hours navigating the maze before finding their way back to the surface. 3 of them had resigned from active service afterward, not from injury. From the quiet, persistent feeling that the structure had been watching them and had decided they were not worth killing. Marin was not military. She was a structural geologist with a secondary certification in xenoarchaeological material science, which was a polite way of saying she spent her professional life crawling through places that had been built by species so old their names had been forgotten, and whose engineering principles operated on assumptions that made human physicists uncomfortable. She was 34 years old, carried 11 kilograms of equipment on her back, and had entered the aura threshold alone because 60 years of expeditions had taught her one thing the official reports danced around without ever stating plainly. The structure responded differently to solitary entrants than to groups. Every group had been redirected. Every group had been shown the maze, the moving walls, the sealed passages. The structure treated groups like immune responses, surrounding them, confusing them, and gently expelling them. But the 3 individuals who had gone in alone, one from the 2nd expedition, one from the 5th, and one from the 6th, had each penetrated deeper than any squad. The one from the 6th expedition, a Thanari linguist named Cascio Wren, had reached what she believed was a central chamber before her equipment failed, and she was forced to retreat. Her report described a vast open space with a ceiling she could not see, and a door that filled the entire far wall, sealed, covered in inscriptions that pulsed with faint violet light when she approached. Cascio Wren had not been able to read the inscriptions. She had described them as responsive, shifting when she moved, changing configuration when she changed her angle of approach, as though the door were studying her the way she was studying it. She had spent 4 hours at the door before her atmospheric recycler began to fail and she retreated. In her report, filed 3 years ago, she had written one sentence that Marin had underlined and carried in her memory like a compass bearing. The structure is not a defense system. It is an examination. Marin stood up from her crouch and checked her equipment. The recording rig on her vest was still transmitting. The atmospheric sensor clipped to her belt showed 21% oxygen, standard. The seismic mapper in her pack was humming softly, building a real-time model of the structure around her based on micro-vibrations in the stone. She had 60 hours of supplies, though no one had ever needed more than 40 inside the threshold. The structure always found a way to send you back before your consumables ran out. It was polite about it. That was what unnerved the breviary the most. Not the danger, the courtesy. The passage ahead was narrower than the one behind her, the walls closer, the ceiling lower. The stone was different here. The outer corridors had been built from the same basalt that formed the surrounding mountain, rough-hewn and utilitarian. This stone was smooth, almost polished, a dark gray with a faint violet undertone that caught her headlamp and held the light for a fraction of a second longer than physics should have allowed. She pressed her gloved hand against the wall. Warm, not from geothermal activity. The heat was too even, too precisely distributed, the kind of warmth that came from something engineered. "I'm past the first seal," she said. "Corridor has narrowed, stone has changed. It's the same material Cascio Wren described in her report. Smooth, dark gray, faint violet cast, warm to the touch." "Noted," Dodd said. "Marin, I need to tell you something about your position data." "Tell me." "You've moved 200 meters since the pressure plate triggered. Your tracker shows you 110 meters deep and descending. But the seismic profile we took of the structure last week showed solid rock below 100 meters. No cavities, no passages." Marin kept walking. "The structure rearranges." "I understand that conceptually. I'm telling you that the space you're currently standing in did not exist 6 days ago. The rock was there, dense, unbroken basalt, and now you're walking through it." She let that settle. The passage curved gently to the left, and as she followed the curve, the ceiling dropped another half-meter. Marin ducked, adjusting her pack straps. Her headlamp caught a gleam 20 meters ahead, a reflection off something embedded in the floor. She slowed, scanning the ground. The gleam was a metal plate, circular, roughly a meter in diameter, set flush with the stone floor. Its surface was polished to a mirror finish, and in the beam of her headlamp she could see her own reflection staring up at her from the dark gray metal. The plate was engraved with concentric circles, each ring inscribed with characters she did not recognize. Fine lines radiated outward from the plate into the stone walls, as though the plate were the center of a web, and the lines were threads connecting it to the structure's deeper architecture. "I've got something, metal plate in the floor, inscribed. It looks integrated into the surrounding stone. Don't step on it." "Wasn't planning to." She edged along the wall, pressing her shoulder against the warm stone, and moved past the plate with her boots firmly on the basalt border where the floor met the wall. As she cleared the plate's far edge, the concentric circles began to rotate. The innermost ring spun clockwise. The next ring spun counterclockwise. The third ring remained still. The fourth spun clockwise again. The motion was silent, frictionless, each ring moving independently of the others with the precision of a watchmaker's mechanism that had never needed winding. A click echoed through the passage, then a second click further away, deeper inside the structure. Then a sustained grinding noise that came from everywhere at once, transmitted through the stone itself. The sound of something massive adjusting its position far below Marin's feet. "The seismic mapper is going haywire," Dodd said. "The structure below you just shifted. I'm showing new voids opening up between 100 and 150 meters depth. 3 of them. No, 4. They're forming in sequence like lock cycling. It's responding to my movement past the plate. To your decision to go around it instead of over it, you mean. Marin, the second expedition, reported a similar plate. Their geologist stepped directly on it. The corridor sealed on both sides, and they had to wait 6 hours for the walls to open again. The structure ejected them after that. Marin filed that. The structure was testing, not just detecting presence but observing behavior. How you moved through it mattered, what you chose to touch and what you chose to avoid. The plate had been an obvious obstacle, and she had treated it with caution. The structure had approved. More locks were opening. She kept walking. The passage curved again, descended again, and the ceiling rose back to a comfortable height. The violet undertone in the stone deepened. The warmth increased. After another 100 meters, her headlamp caught something ahead that made her stop. A junction. The corridor split into 3 branches, each one identical in width and height, each one descending at the same gentle angle. The walls of all 3 branches were covered in inscriptions. She pulled the recording lens from her vest and clipped it to the frame of her headlamp, activating the wide-angle capture. The inscriptions were not carved. They were raised, standing proud of the wall surface by perhaps 2 millimeters, rendered in the same dark violet stone but with an internal luminescence that made each character glow faintly, like letters written in phosphorescent ink. The characters were not from any writing system in the Concord's databases. Cascio Wren had spent 3 years trying to decode them, and had concluded only that they were logographic, each symbol representing a concept rather than a sound, and that the system contained at least 600 unique characters. As Marin watched, the inscriptions on the left-hand passage began to shift. Characters rearranged themselves, sliding across the stone surface with a fluidity that made them look liquid, reforming into new configurations. The center passage remained static. The right-hand passage began to glow more brightly, the violet light intensifying until it cast visible shadows on the floor. The structure was responding to her presence, not with violence, with information. Dawn, are you getting the visual feed? Yes, the linguistic team is recording. They're asking you to hold position for analysis. I'm not holding position. Which branch is glowing brightest? Right. She took the right branch. The passage descended more steeply now, and Marin felt the air pressure change, a subtle compression that told her she was going deep enough for the weight of the rock above to become relevant. The inscriptions on the walls grew denser, the characters smaller, packed more tightly together, and the violet luminescence brightened with every step until her headlamp became unnecessary. She switched it off. The corridor was lit entirely by the inscriptions, a soft violet glow that turned the polished stone walls into something that resembled the interior of a geode. 20 meters in, the floor changed again. The stone gave way to tiles, dark ceramic set in a herringbone pattern, each tile warm and smooth beneath her boots. The tiles were ancient. She could see the firing marks, the faint irregularities of handmade manufacture, but the joints between them were tight and true, as if they had been laid by someone who considered imprecise tilework a personal insult. The first trap hit her at 30 meters. A section of floor 4 tiles wide dropped without warning, revealing a channel beneath the passage, 3 meters deep, its bottom lined with stone ridges sharp enough to cut boot leather. Marin's weight was already shifting forward when the tiles gave way. Instinct took over. Her right foot found the lip of solid floor on the far side of the gap, and she lunged, catching her balance with both hands on the stone wall. The ceramic tiles that had fallen smashed against the ridges below with a sound like breaking pottery. Marin hung on the edge for 2 seconds, then pulled herself forward and stood on solid ground. Her heart was hammering. She looked down into the gap. The stone ridges were not random. They formed a pattern, the same logographic characters she had seen on the walls, carved into the floor of the pit as though the trap itself were a sentence written in architecture. The message was the medium. Marin, what just happened? Floor trap, I'm clear. Your heart rate says you almost weren't. She took a breath. The inscriptions on the walls around the trap section were brighter than the rest of the corridor. Two characters directly above the gap were glowing gold instead of violet, pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm. As she watched, a third character shifted from violet to gold. Then a fourth. The structure was keeping score. Dawed, the inscriptions near the trap just changed color. 4 characters have gone from violet to gold. The pattern looks sequential. Like a counter. Like an acknowledgement. She moved on. 40 meters, 50. The passage straightened and widened, and then Marin's boots hit a different surface. Not stone, not ceramic. Metal. Dark, hammered iron, ancient and warm, set into the floor in panels that were joined so precisely she could feel the seams with her fingertips but could not fit a hair between them. The metalwork was covered in the same inscriptions, but these were larger, bolder, and the violet glow in them was shot through with threads of deep gold that pulsed in a slow, rhythmic cadence. Heartbeat. The structure had a heartbeat. Marin, your atmospheric readings are changing. Oxygen concentration is increasing. You're at 23%, up from 21 at the entrance. The air down there is being conditioned. I know, I can feel it. The air was different, cleaner. There was a faint mineral quality to it that reminded her of standing beside a glacier-fed lake in winter, the air so pure it felt like drinking water. The structure was not merely tolerating her presence, it was accommodating her. Then the ceiling opened. Not collapsed, opened. A section 3 meters long retracted upward, revealing a vertical shaft that climbed into darkness. From inside the shaft, warm air descended, carrying a scent of old stone and something else, something chemical and sharp that Marin's nose categorized as ozone. The walls of the shaft were studded with handholds, irregular projections of iron and stone, arranged in a climbing pattern that was too systematic to be natural but too varied to be a ladder. Some handholds were solid. Others, she could already tell, were not. The ozone smell was coming from above, and above was where the structure wanted her to go. The passage has dead-ended into a vertical shaft. The structure wants me to climb. Marin, the shaft isn't on any previous mapping. The 5th expedition solo entrant reported that the structure offered him a straight corridor at this depth. The architecture is different for you. I know. She tested the first handhold. Solid iron, warm, bolted into stone that showed no sign of age or deterioration. She tested the second. It shifted under her weight, not enough to come free, but enough to tell her it would if she hung on it for more than a moment. The third was solid. The fourth was stone, and when she gripped it, a fine crack appeared in the rock around its base, a warning. This one will hold once and once only. She climbed. The shaft rose 10 meters, then 20, then curved at an angle that should have been impossible for a vertical shaft, but which the structure accomplished by gradually tilting the walls until what had been a climb became a steep walk on a surface that sloped upward at 60 degrees. The handholds transitioned into footholds, then into steps, then into a ramp that leveled out into a new corridor. This corridor was different from everything below. The walls were not stone or iron, they were glass, or something that resembled glass, a transparent material with the amber tint of old honey, and through it Marin could see the interior of the mountain. Not rock, machinery. Vast, silent, dark machinery that filled the spaces between the corridors and chambers like the organs of a body fill the spaces between bone, gears the size of houses. Shafts of black iron running vertically and horizontally through a matrix of interlocking mechanisms that had been still for 4,000 years but showed no corrosion, no dust, no sign of entropy. The machinery was dormant, waiting. As she walked, a mechanism the size of a cargo shuttle rotated 1/4 turn behind the glass wall to her left. The movement was slow, deliberate, soundless through the amber barrier. A second mechanism, deeper in the structure, engaged with the first, and a vibration traveled through the floor that Marin felt in her ankles. The structure was waking up around her, not all at once, piece by piece. Each mechanism she passed stirred into life, as though her proximity were the current flowing through a circuit that had been waiting for the switch to close. "Dawd, I'm in a glass-walled corridor. I can see the structure's interior mechanisms. They're activating as I pass. We're picking up the seismic signatures. The entire western quadrant of the mountain is registering micro-movements. Marin, whatever this structure is, it's not a building. The Brevari engineer on our team just called it a machine that looks like a mountain. He seems very upset about this. Tell him to document everything." He's already documenting. He's also swearing in Brevari, which I think means the same thing. The glass corridor ended in a chamber. Not the chamber, a smaller one, an antechamber, hexagonal, with 6 walls of the same amber glass and a floor of hammered iron. At the center of the hexagon, a pedestal of dark stone rose waist-high. On the pedestal sat a device that Marin's training could not immediately categorize. It was made of interlocking metal rings, each ring inscribed with the logographic characters, the whole assembly roughly the size of a dinner plate and oriented horizontally. The rings were still. The inscriptions were dark. As Marin stepped into the hexagon, 3 things happened in rapid sequence. The first, the glass walls opaqued, turning from transparent amber to solid black in less than a second, cutting off her view of the machinery and enclosing the chamber in darkness broken only by the violet glow of the inscriptions on the iron floor. The second, the pedestal's device activated. The interlocking rings began to rotate, each one independently, and the inscriptions on each ring lit with violet light. A tone filled the chamber, low and resonant, vibrating the iron floor beneath Marin's boots. The third, the floor began to tilt. Not all at once. One hexagonal section at a time, the iron panels angled downward, creating a slope that steepened with each section. Marin scrambled for balance, her boots sliding on the polished metal. She dropped to one knee, grabbed the edge of a panel seam, and held. The floor continued to tilt, 20 degrees, 30. The panel she was gripping heated beneath her fingers, not enough to burn, enough to make holding uncomfortable. A message: let go. She did not let go. 40 degrees. Marin's arms shook. Her pack pulled at her shoulders, dragging her backward. Below her, the tilted floor revealed a second gap, a channel running beneath the hexagonal panels, dark and deep. The device on the pedestal spun faster. The tone climbed in pitch. The heat in the panel she gripped increased another degree. Then she understood. The structure was not trying to drop her. It was waiting to see what she would do. The plate in the corridor had tested her caution. The floor trap had tested her reflexes. The climbing shaft had tested her endurance. This was testing her nerve. The structure wanted to know if she would hold on or if she would trust it. Marin let go of the panel. She slid. The iron was smooth and warm, and the incline was steep enough that she picked up speed immediately, sliding feet first toward the dark channel beneath the hexagonal floor. Her pack scraped against the metal. The violet inscriptions blurred past on either side. The channel swallowed her. For 3 seconds she was in complete darkness, sliding down a chute of smooth iron that curved and banked like a water slide designed by engineers who had never heard of safety regulations. Then light bloomed ahead, violet gold, and the chute spat her out onto a flat surface. She landed hard, rolled, and came up in a crouch. The chamber she was in now was vast. The ceiling was 100 meters above her, a dome of dark stone covered in inscriptions that blazed with violet light, the characters so dense and so bright that the dome looked like a night sky filled with alien constellations. The chamber was circular, perhaps 300 meters in diameter, its floor the same hammered iron as the passage, its walls rising in smooth, unbroken curves to the luminous dome above. And at the far end of the chamber, filling the wall from floor to ceiling, was the door. Cascio Wren had described it accurately. It was massive, 50 meters tall and 30 meters wide, made of a material that was neither stone nor metal but something that combined the properties of both, dark and dense with the solidity of granite, but reflecting light with the depth and warmth of burnished bronze. Its surface was covered in inscriptions that dwarfed every other character in the structure. Each symbol was the height of a human, raised a full centimeter from the door's surface, and they glowed with a violet light so deep it was almost black, the color of a bruise on the edge of healing. The door was sealed, had been sealed according to every analysis for at least 4,000 years. On the floor in front of the door, scattered like debris after a storm, lay the equipment of previous expeditions. Marin counted as she walked toward the door. A Brevari atmospheric pack, its casing cracked, its seals intact. A set of the Nari sensor wands, their tips still faintly luminous. A human-manufactured drone folded and inert, its deployment struts bent at angles that suggested it had been set down carefully rather than dropped. No bodies, no bones, no signs of violence. The structure had turned them all back, but it had kept their tools, souvenirs, or evidence, proof that others had come this far and been found insufficient. Marin walked past the abandoned equipment. The floor responded to her footsteps. With each step, a ring of golden light bloomed outward from beneath her boot, spreading across the iron panels in a perfect circle before fading. The rings were concentric, overlapping, creating a trail of light that marked her path from the corridor mouth to the door. The chamber was tracking her, recording her approach. At 200 meters from the door, a second trap activated. The iron panels to Marin's left erupted upward, a wall of metal rising 3 meters in half a second, blocking a path she had not intended to take. A fraction of a second later, panels to her right did the same. The structure was channeling her, narrowing her approach to a single corridor of open floor, 20 meters wide, leading straight to the door. On either side of the corridor, the risen panels hummed with violet light, their inscriptions burning bright enough to cast shadows. She was not being herded. She was being received. The corridor the structure had built was not a cage. It was a processional path, the kind of approach you would build for someone expected, someone who had earned the right to walk the last distance in a manner befitting what waited at the end. At 100 meters from the door, the inscriptions on its surface began to move. "Daud, are you seeing this?" "We're seeing it." The entire linguistic team has stopped talking. Marin, the characters are rearranging into what Cascio described as responsive mode. The door is reading you. "I know what it's doing." She kept walking, 70 meters. The inscriptions shifted faster now, characters flowing across the door's surface in currents and eddies that followed patterns too complex for her to track. Some characters were growing larger, rising further from the surface, their glow intensifying from violet to a bright electric purple. Others were shrinking, dimming, sinking back into the door as though rejected. The door was running a calculation. Every step Marin took provided it with new data, and every piece of data refined the equation it was solving. 50 meters. The golden rings beneath her boots were brighter now, and they were no longer fading. Each ring persisted, glowing steadily, so that the floor behind her was a solid trail of warm light. Ahead, the door's inscriptions had organized themselves into what looked like a series of concentric circles, the largest characters on the outer ring, the smallest at the center, all of them pulsing with that deep violet luminescence in time with the rhythmic golden cadence in the floor. The heartbeat was stronger here. Marin could feel it in her sternum, not a vibration transmitted through the floor, a pressure in the air itself, as though the chamber were breathing and she was standing inside its lungs. 30 meters, the door made a sound. Not mechanical. Not the grinding of stone or the screech of metal. A tone. A single, sustained, impossibly pure note that filled the chamber the way water fills a glass, rising from below audibility into a frequency that resonated in her jawbone and her sinuses and the small bones of her inner ear. The note held, and then began to shift, climbing through harmonic intervals that no human instrument could produce, each interval landing with a precision that made the previous note feel like a question and the new one feel like an answer. At 20 meters, the door's inscription stopped moving. Every character on the surface had locked into place. The concentric circles were complete, and at their center, directly in front of Marin at eye level, a single symbol pulsed brighter than all the others. It was not a character she recognized from the walls or the corridors. It was new. The glow was not violet but gold, warm and steady, the color of late afternoon sun through old glass. She stopped. The tone in the air resolved into silence, and the silence had weight. Marin, Dodd's voice had changed. Not louder but tighter. The Brevari monitoring station just reported something. Every golden character you triggered along your route, the ones that changed color after the traps, all of them just went to maximum brightness. The whole path you walked from the surface to where you are right now is lit up in gold. The structure is tracking your complete route. It's mapping your entire journey as a single continuous pattern. I know. Cascio Ren didn't trigger any golden characters. The Brevari squads didn't either. Marin, nobody has ever turned those characters gold. Not in 60 years. Then the floor beneath her began to change. The hammered iron panels directly under her boots split along their seams, and from between the panels, light rose. Not the golden rings of her footsteps or the violet glow of the inscriptions. Something older. Something that carried a color she had never seen before. A shade that existed between violet and gold, neither warm nor cool, flickering at the edge of perception like a color the human eye had not been designed to see but recognized anyway. The way a newborn recognizes a face before understanding what a face is. The light climbed up around her boots, her shins, her knees. It was not hot. It was not cold. It was present in the way that gravity is present, a force that does not announce itself but defines the shape of everything. Marin, Dodd's voice was very quiet. Your biometrics are stable. Heart rate has dropped to 62. You're calmer than you've been since you entered. But I need you to know that every sensor we have trained on the structure is registering the same thing. The entire complex, not just the chamber you're in, but the entire mountain, the entire geological formation, all of it just woke up. Thermal signature has changed across the full structure. Seismic profile has shifted. The Brevari monitoring station on the far side of the range is reporting tectonic micro-adjustments consistent with a distributed mechanical system activating across a volume of approximately 9 cubic kilometers. Marin heard him. She understood the words. But the light was around her waist now, and where it touched her skin through the gaps in her clothing, at her wrists, at her throat, she felt something that was not heat and not pressure but recognition. The way a lock feels the right key. The way a circuit feels current for the first time. The structure was not testing her anymore. It was confirming. She took another step toward the door. The golden symbol at the door's center flared, and the concentric rings of inscriptions began to rotate. Not the characters on the surface. The door itself. The massive slab of stone bronze was turning, its surface divided into rings like the mechanism of a combination lock, each ring rotating independently in alternating directions, the inscriptions on each ring aligning as they turned. The sound was enormous, not loud but deep, subsonic, felt in the bones rather than heard in the ears. The floor shook. Dust sifted from the dome above, glittering in the violet light like falling stars. Marin did not stop walking. At 10 meters, the door's outer ring locked into place with a concussion that sent a pressure wave through the chamber. The risen iron walls on either side of the processional path vibrated with the impact, their inscriptions flaring bright enough to leave afterimages. At 7 meters, the second ring locked. The tone that had been silent returned, doubled 2 notes now, harmonizing at intervals that made the first sound feel like it had been incomplete all along, a word missing its vowels, a sentence without its verb. At 5, the third ring locked. At 3, the fourth. At 2, the fifth. She could see the mechanism now. The rings were not merely rotating on the surface. They were recessing, each locked ring sinking into the door by a few centimeters, creating a stepped pattern that spiraled inward toward the golden symbol at the center. The door was not opening. It was unfolding, peeling itself apart layer by layer, each layer a lock, each lock keyed to something the structure had been waiting to detect. Not a code, not a key, a presence, the right presence, the one it had been built to recognize. The golden symbol was all that remained, pulsing in the center of the stepped spiral like a heart exposed by surgery. The violet gold light from the floor had climbed to Marin's shoulders, encasing her in a luminous column that cast her shadow backward across the processional path. A long, dark shape stretched across a trail of gold. Marin raised her hand. Every instinct she possessed registered a warning. The miner's daughter instinct that said never touch what you don't understand. The geologist's instinct that said document before you interact. The simple animal instinct that said unknown things in the dark are dangerous. All of them spoken in the voices of people she loved, her father's steady caution, her mother's practical reserve, her professor's clinical detachment. All of them telling her to stop, to study, to wait. But a deeper instinct had woken, one she had not known she carried, and it spoke in no voice she recognized because it was older than voice, older than language, older than the separation between knowing and being. And it said, "This is yours." Her palm pressed flat against the golden symbol. The door spoke. Not in sound, not in vibration, in meaning. The way you understand that fire is hot before you learn the word for burning. The way you understand your mother's voice before you understand language. The meaning arrived complete, whole, needing no translation, carrying no ambiguity, filling every synapse in Marin Salk's brain with a single recognition that rewrote nothing about who she was but illuminated everything about what she had always been. Daughter of the endless vault. The word daughter did not mean child. It meant inheritor. It meant the one who comes after and takes up what was left. It meant the hand that reaches back through 4,000 years and grips the hand that reached forward, and the two hands are the same hand, and the distance between them is nothing, because what they are holding has not changed and will not change and cannot change because it is the oldest thing the species knows how to do: keep, hold, protect, carry forward. The golden symbol blazed white. The concentric rings of the door reversed, each one rising from its recess and rotating outward, and as they turned, the spaces between them widened, and through the widening gaps, light poured into the chamber, the same impossible violet gold, but brighter now, concentrated, as though the space behind the door contained a sun made of that color and nothing else. The door opened. Not swung. Not slid. The rings separated entirely, each one lifting free of the others and rising into the dome above like petals peeling from a flower in slow motion, the massive stone-bronze segments rotating as they rose, inscriptions blazing, the deep subsonic hum climbing into a chord that was not music, but was the closest thing to music that architecture could produce. The entire chamber resonated with it. The violet constellations on the dome pulsed in time. The golden trail of Marin's footsteps blazed so brightly, the floor looked like a river of molten metal. The risen iron walls that had formed the processional path retracted. The chamber was open again, fully lit in violet gold, and from every surface, every inscription, every panel of hammered iron, light pulsed outward toward the open door as though the entire structure were exhaling. Beyond the door was a vault. Not a room, a vault in the original, absolute sense of the word, a space designed for keeping. The ceiling was lost in luminous haze above, or perhaps there was no ceiling, perhaps the vault extended upward through the entire mountain and beyond. The walls were lined from floor to vanishing point with alcoves, thousands of them, tens of thousands, each one containing an object that Marin's geologist brain categorized automatically. Tools, devices, containers, instruments, mechanisms, weapons, art, text, models, maps. The collection was not organized by type. It was organized by age. The objects nearest the door were the youngest, and even these were older than anything in the Concord's archives. As the alcoves receded into the vault's depth, the objects grew older, simpler, more fundamental, until the farthest visible alcoves held things so ancient they looked like raw elements shaped by intent rather than technology. A stone with a hole drilled through it, a length of cord wound into a knot, a piece of worked bone. The history of a species, not displayed, stored, protected. Kept safe in a vault that had sealed itself 4,000 years ago, and had opened for no one until a structural geologist from Kaelva, Finland, Earth, Sol system, had pressed her hand against a door that her entire civilization had assumed was locked against them. Marin stepped through. The vault responded to her presence the way the corridor and the chamber had, but amplified beyond anything she could have prepared for. Each alcove she passed illuminated, its contents glowing with soft violet light, and from each object a thread of golden luminescence extended toward her, thin as spider silk, connecting the object to the light that still surrounded her body. She was the node, the center of the web. Every artifact in the vault was orienting itself to her position, acknowledging her authority, recognizing her right to be here. Her right, not her qualification, not her credentials, not the 7 years of field work or the 3 published papers or the endorsement of the Concord Xenoarchaeological Survey. The vault did not care about any of that. It cared about something encoded in her cells, in the specific arrangement of proteins and the particular architecture of her neural pathways, in the inheritance she carried without knowing she carried it, passed down through 200,000 years of unbroken human lineage from the builders who had constructed this place to the woman who now walked through it. Marin, Dodd's voice was barely audible through static. The structure's activation was interfering with communications. We're reading. The instruments are showing. The entire structure has reclassified. The Brevari station is reporting that the threshold's energy signature has changed from dormant to... They don't have a classification for it. They're calling it custodial. Marin, can you hear me? I can hear you. What's in there? She looked down the length of the vault, at the thousands of alcoves stretching into a distance that should not have existed inside a mountain, at the objects glowing in their recesses, at the golden threads connecting every one of them to the light around her body. She thought about Cascio Wren, who had stood before this door for 4 hours and had understood that the structure was an examination. Cascio had been right. It was an examination, but not of capability or worthiness. It was an examination of identity. The structure had been reading every entrant for 60 years, checking their biology, their neurology, the deep code markers that distinguished one species from another, and it had been asking one question every time. Are you the ones who built me? The Brevari had failed the question. The Thanari had failed. The Velori assessment teams had failed. Every squad, every expedition, every probe drone and seismic mapper had failed, not because they lacked skill or technology, but because they were not human. The structure had been built by humans. The vault had been filled by humans. The door had been keyed to human biology, not a retinal scan or a DNA match or any technology that could be spoofed, but something deeper, something woven into the foundational architecture of the human nervous system, a resonance pattern that 4,000 years of evolution had not altered because it was not a surface feature. It was a root, the oldest root. The one that connected Marin Salk, structural geologist from a mining town in Finland, to the species that had built this vault when the rest of the galaxy's civilizations were still discovering fire. Everything, she said, there's everything in here. She walked deeper. The golden threads multiplied with every step, connecting her to objects she could not yet see, to alcoves that were illuminating in waves ahead of her, the vault waking section by section, as though her presence were a current flowing through a circuit that had been open for millennia. The air was warm and clean and carried that glacier lake purity, and the heartbeat of the structure was steady around her, a rhythm that matched her own resting heart rate so precisely that she could not tell where her pulse ended and the vaults began. In one alcove she passed, a device resembling a compass rose made of dark iron sat on a stone shelf. As she drew near, its needle turned to face her, and a single golden inscription lit beneath it, the same gold she now carried in her own light. In another alcove, a sheet of translucent material, thinner than paper and stronger than anything in the Concord's materials catalog, unrolled itself and displayed a map of star positions that her trained eye recognized as a region of the galaxy that current human astronomers had not yet surveyed. The map was 4,000 years old. The stars it depicted were real. She could feel the vault offering these things to her, not giving, not surrendering, but presenting, the way an old house presents its rooms to the one who comes home and opens the curtains. At the vault's center, the alcoves gave way to an open space. A circular platform of hammered iron, raised half a meter from the floor, its surface inscribed with a single massive symbol that Marin recognized as the same character that had been at the center of the door. The golden symbol, her symbol. Above the platform, suspended in the air with no visible support, a sphere of dark stone rotated slowly on its axis. It was the size of a basketball, its surface covered in raised inscriptions that glowed with the same violet-gold light that filled the vault. As Marin approached, the sphere's rotation slowed, stopped, and the inscriptions on its surface began to rearrange. The sphere was a key, or a manual, or a crown. The vault did not operate on metaphors Marin's civilization had words for yet. The sphere was the thing that the daughter of the endless vault was meant to carry, the interface between the human custodian and the structure she was custodian of, and it had been waiting here, rotating in the dark, for 4,000 years. Marin climbed onto the platform. The iron was warm beneath her boots. The sphere descended until it hovered at chest height, close enough to touch. The inscriptions on its surface completed their rearrangement and locked into a configuration that, for the first time since she had entered the structure, Marin could read. Not because she understood the logographic system, because the sphere was translating, projecting meaning directly into her comprehension, the way the door had, bypassing language entirely, speaking in the grammar of recognition. The inscription said, "We built this for you, not for you specifically, for whoever came, for the daughter or the son who would walk in alone and press a hand against the door and hear the name we gave to the ones who keep what matters. We were the first. We walked between the stars before the roads had names. We built and we stored and we kept, because keeping is the oldest human act, older than language, older than fire, older than the first tool. The hand that picks up a stone and carries it home is the hand that built this vault. You carry it in you. You have always carried it. We sealed this place because the things inside it are too important to lose and too dangerous to leave unguarded. And we knew, with the certainty of a species that has been keeping things since before it could speak, that one of you would come. One of you always comes." The sphere settled into her hands. The weight was substantial, grounding, like holding a river stone warmed by summer sun. The violet gold light that had surrounded her body since the floor split open contracted, flowed through her arms, and entered the sphere. For a moment, the sphere blazed so brightly that the entire vault was lit as clearly as noon on a cloudless day, every alcove visible, every object sharp-edged and real, the full staggering scale of the collection revealed in a single instant of total illumination. Tens of thousands of alcoves, hundreds of thousands of objects, the accumulated knowledge and craft and art and technology of a civilization that had been building when the galaxy was young, stored and sealed and guarded by a structure that was itself the greatest artifact of all, a machine disguised as a mountain, an examination disguised as a defense system, a welcome disguised as a warning. Then the light settled to a steady glow, warm and violet gold, pulsing gently in the sphere's inscriptions. Dodd. I'm here, signals clearing. Whatever happened in there, the structure has stabilized. The Brevari station reports the seismic activity has stopped. Thermal signature is steady. The whole complex is quiet, controlled. Like something that was powering up, just finished its startup sequence. I need you to contact the Conquered Heritage Authority. What do I tell them? Marin looked at the sphere in her hands, at the vault around her, at the golden threads connecting every object to the light she carried. She thought about the 7 expeditions, the Brevari squads redirected in their power armor, the Venari linguist who had stood before this door and understood it was an examination, the abandoned equipment scattered on the chamber floor outside, and all the species who had approached this mountain for 60 years asking the wrong question. They had asked, what is inside? The structure had been asking something else entirely. It had been asking, who are you? And Marin Salk, whose father had been a miner and whose mother had been a school teacher, and whose grandfather had been a mechanic, and whose grandmother had kept a garden and a shelf of pressed flowers in a house in Kailva, where the winter nights lasted 18 hours, and the shelves were always full of things too old and too loved to throw away. Marin Salk, who came from a long, unbroken line of people who kept things. People who carried stones home and filled shelves and maintained gardens and remembered names, and held onto what mattered long past the point when letting go would have been easier, had answered. Tell them the aura threshold is open, she said. Tell them it was never locked against us. It was locked for us. And tell them a human opened it, and that the vault recognizes human custodial authority, and that their Class 9 designation needs to be revised. This structure isn't hostile. It was never hostile. It was waiting. She paused. The sphere pulsed warm in her hands. The vault hummed around her, steady and patient, the heartbeat of a machine that had waited 4 millennia for a keeper and had found one. Tell them we have a great deal of work to do. The inscriptions on the walls glowed their soft violet light. The objects in their alcoves rested in their places, catalogued and protected and present, the way they had been since the day the door sealed and the builders walked away, trusting that the vault would know its own when the time came. The traps had been questions. The maze had been a filter. The door had been a handshake. And the vault, with its tens of thousands of alcoves and its 4,000 years of silence, had been a promise kept. Marin stood at its center, holding the sphere, feeling the weight of what she had inherited, the responsibility of it, the quiet enormity of being the one who came. Not the strongest, not the smartest, not the most qualified. The one who walked in alone, chose carefully, held on when the floor tilted, let go when trust was asked, and put her hand on a door that had been sealed since before any living civilization could remember and was recognized. Because keeping things, carrying things, holding what matters against the dark, was written so deeply into human marrow that a 4,000-year-old door could still read it in her blood. The light was steady, the vault was open, and the work had begun.